Welcome to our final Ask the AD, wrapping up the 2022-23 season. Brian Smoller with Director of Athletics Gene Taylor. Glad you could join us. We've got a lot of questions to get to, but more than that, just kind of putting a bow on what was a fantastic year for K-State sports all the way around, and looking ahead to what we think might even be an even better 23-24. At least we hope so. Anyway, let's start first with the thing we always talk about during the summer. That's conference stuff. Will we ever get to a summer where we're not talking about expansion or realignment or Big 12 stuff?
That's a great question, and I don't know that we'll ever get to that. Certainly it's been in the news a lot, not just within the Big 12. You've got the ACC talking about some different things. You've obviously got the Pac-12 and their TV deal. So I think it's always going to be out there because it's not just us in the Power 5 level. It's other conferences that are looking to make moves at the Group of 5, et cetera. So I think it's probably a conversation that hopefully will end soon. But right now it's just a lot of information out there. Most of it is misinformation. But it's certainly something that I think as a conference, and Brett Yormark has done a great job of walking us through as ADs and presidents a lot of different scenarios, none of which are taking shape right now. It's just the what ifs in conference alignment. What if the Pac-12 doesn't strike a great TV deal? Would there be any interest in those schools? What if this or what if that? So, I think right now I think we're in a great place as a conference, a better place than we were a couple of years ago. And I think right now Brett's doing a great job helping us through that, just to look at what might happen. If it happens, fine. If it doesn't, I think we're fine staying where we are.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned in an interview recently was just about how Brett has done a great job of making everybody think a little different outside the box, and be it for the Big 12's brand or revenue and all that sort of stuff. It's been pretty cool to see Big 12 on the cutting edge of some of that stuff.
100%.
The other thing that's been talked about is NIL. It's constantly, I'm sure you're asked about it everywhere you go.
Right.
And what recently has been in the news is the new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, talking about Congress and perhaps enacting legislation on NIL. So I guess the question for you are, what are the chances from an athletic director's perspective that is the confidence level that will succeed? And then can NIL be regulated in any way?
Well, I think a couple of things. For early on, we didn't think it would. But a lot of conferences, a lot of individual presidents, a lot of ADs, conference commissioners, and now Charlie, President Baker, have been in D.C. And I will tell you this, that President Baker brings a lot of respect in Washington, D.C. because as a Republican governor, a Democratic state, was elected twice. I think they see him as somebody that understands, and they trust him maybe a little bit more. And so when he goes and talks about the importance of finding, NIL laws done by the federal government as opposed to 30 different states with 30 different laws, I think it's beginning to have some impact on our legislators. I think there's some of these conferences that have gone and said, hey, this NIL is really hurting us in different states, and those senators and congressmen are going, well, I live in that state. Yeah, okay, I understand that. So we're able to finally paint a picture that they're beginning to listen to. How to get legislation through is not easy, as we know. We haven't passed a lot of legislation, because of where Congress is. But I think the conversations are a lot better, a lot more positive, but we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully it'll pass. And if you have any questions about NIL, of course, our website's a great resource, kstatesports.com. There's a little NIL drop-down menu. Go into that. And, of course, we have two great partners in Wildcat Collectives and Wildcats Den and Wildcat NIL that you can read more about there as well. All right, so let's get to the questions from Twitter. Our good best friend, Scott Wildcat, who jumps in with a question not about alcohol sales.
That's a good thing.
That's right. Instead, it's about how proud are you to be one of only a handful of athletic departments to take zero money from the university, student fees, or the state?
Well, yeah, I think it is somewhat of a badge of honor that there are only a few Division I schools out there, Power 5 level, that don't take any institutional money, any student fees, any state dollars. We get no tuition discounts. But it makes it a challenge. We've had a great financial year, but sometimes we are, a budget that's pretty tight, but we manage our resources very, very well. There was a recent article by USA Today that talked about the profitability of Kansas State, and that's great to see, and those numbers are real. It's just some of those dollars in the revenue side aren't always able to be used for operational needs. But we do a great job. Our finance CFO does a great job of leading us through some challenging times which we were just coming out of for a couple of years. But it is a badge of honor, the fact that we don't need or ask for university help, student fees. It's all and it's been a lot because of our fan base, our great fan base that supports us at a high level.
No doubt. And I know there were a couple of fan questions, as we always get them every time, about adding sports, and it's not as if that's quick on the trigger, so to speak. But I know, that, as you mentioned, trying to stay a little bit in the black is good to support the sports that we have and provide them the resources to be champions in the league.
We need to be competitive, and we need to be competitive based on how we are able to recruit, how our coaches are able to recruit, competitive in terms of salaries and those things to make sure we keep good staff. But the numbers would be nice if that was all dollars we could use, but unfortunately some of those dollars are restricted. Some
of that, of course, you talk about contracts, went to a certain guy at the basketball level, and Jerome Tang, and also at Chris Kleiman, and obviously successful seasons for both of those two. And speaking of basketball, our next question comes from at Aggieville A. Cats, Aggieville Alley Cats, another great podcast that supports K-State. We talk about when will we see the design of the new basketball court? Boy, do we have a release date, so to speak?
That's
on
a great question. I don't know that we were planning on a release date. We may just wait till they walk into the arena for the first time it's out there. Probably something we can look at, I guess. I will tell them not to expect anything out of the ordinary. It's going to be a pretty normal basketball court that we have seen in the past. So I don't expect anything massive changes in what it's going to look like.
Changes have always been interesting for fans, usually this time of year, right? You get other things to talk about, and so the graphic designers that are out there on the side, they love to come up with different designs.
Pretty creative people out there, by
no doubt, for courts and also for uniforms. And we had some questions about alternate helmets for K-State football, which leads kind of the overall thing about alternate uniforms for football. I know Chris has mentioned this a few times. He's loves the classic look, wants to kind of stay with that. But what is the trajectory for alternate uniforms for football?
That's another great question. I don't know that, Al Serby, our football equipment manager and coach, talk a lot about that. I haven't seen no designs have come across my desk, which, as I think we've mentioned before, it's usually a pretty long process from design to implementing it. As you know, we've all talked about, where we are with our apparel contract right now and trying to work through that. But, I know coach is interested in it, but I do know that a few times that we have done something a little bit different, the success on the field hasn't come. So I think coach is getting a little more superstitious about what they wear, and I think the players are as well.
Yeah, Jeff Mitty always loves to quote Michael Scott from Dunder Mifflin and The Office of, "I'm not superstitious, I'm a little stitious," and Chris Kleiman may be falling into that same deal. All right, speaking of football, this question comes from at Chad J. Holt, having a little fun here on the show today. Are we ever going to get a trophy for the Farmageddon game? I'm not sure that Farmageddon's ever been christened by the athletic department.
Yeah, that's more of a fan base trophy. But, obviously we've got a great rivalry with Iowa State and amongst others. And right now we've got some other things that we're doing with our Ag Day and some other opportunities to promote our relationship with the great ag community in which we live in. So I don't see us having a Farmageddon trophy anytime soon.
One last question, too, about football. Are you going to be selling sections of the old turf? This comes from at Layer Pay. I don't know. I know at one time, back in the day, we did this when it was the old turf. But I don't know that there was ever any discussions about this
No,
one.
there wasn't. And part of it is this turf is, like you said, it's different. There's a lot of stuff in there, sand and the black, and it's heavy. So it's to cut out any, and then there's just some things that go on in the course of a football game that I don't think anybody really wants to have hanging in their rooms or their bar area. It's just, but no, we're not going to do that. Some of it we are talking to some local high schools if they need it for some practice area and bigger pieces, but in terms of individual chunks, probably not going to happen.
And we mentioned this before. It was a great season. Your thoughts, just reflecting back on what this last year was, highs and lows. And I'm not going to ask you for your favorite moment necessarily, but when you look back on it, what was it that stood out to you about this last year?
I think the biggest thing for me was obviously the surprising success of basketball, and then to be able to win a Big 12 championship in football when the expectations just weren't there for either one of those programs, and to be able to rise through that, the players and the coaches to get us to that level. And then probably is equally important is the energy behind it with our fan base and some of the things we've seen. We went to our tour through the state, and the numbers were as big as they've been, and even more so. And so, and then the indications of where we are going into this season in terms of where we are with ticket sales for both football, men and women's basketball, because I think there's a lot of energy behind not both football and men's basketball, but women's basketball as well. So that's what I'm enjoying, is just seeing the energy behind our program right now.
Yeah, ticket sales for all of those three sports you just mentioned are way up. Football significantly ahead of where they were at this point last year. Same with football and volleyball, or football and men's and women's basketball. And of course, new volleyball coach, a new volleyball arena debuting this year.
That's I'm anxious to get in there and get to see the fan base. We'll probably be announcing some opportunities for the public to get into the new arena at some point. But for Jason, and he's very excited. And I think there's another sport right there that there's going to be a lot of excitement about.
Yeah, soccer is expected to take a step forward, and baseball expecting to have a big year after a season where they narrowly missed the NCAA tournament.
Narrowly missed. We won't. I've had plenty of opportunities to share my thoughts with the committee recently, so.
Good. Baseball tickets aren't on sale now, but trust me, you're going to want to set those aside for next year. Pete Hughes' club is going to be poised. They are well motivated, let's just say, heading into next year with a large core returning. This has been fun. I know we'll take a break here for a couple of months. We'll see you here right before football season.
Looking forward to the fall, and thanks everybody for a great year, and let's have another one this year.
Absolutely. Keep the questions coming. Gene will always be anxious at least to see them. I don't know if he'll necessarily respond. It depends on the tenor of the question, I guess. But keep them coming. We'll get to them here in a couple of months. And in the meantime, thanks to Preston Kerner for all his work putting these together each time. For Gene Taylor, I'm Brian Smoller. Thank you for watching Ask the AD.